The side door of the equerries corridor was locked when I arrived. That Monday morning I noted it the way you note the weather. It was 0600, the sky over St. James's was the color of weak tea, and the door was locked. By 0640 it was unlocked. I know because I passed it on my way back from the guardroom, and the bolt was thrown clear, and the handle was turned a quarter-inch out of true, the way it sits when someone has come through in a hurry. I didn't see who. I never see who. In 14 years on this post, I have never once seen the person who unlocks that door in the morning. By 0710, it was locked again. I have asked, over the years, in the careful way you ask things in a place like this. I have asked Sergeant Major Crane, who has been here 28 years and knows where every key in the building lives. I have asked the equerries clerk. I have asked a porter named Tom who retired in 2019 and who on his last day shook my hand and told me to mind the door. He said it like that. Mind the door, Edmund, as though it were a child. The door, you should understand, is governed by two standing orders. The first, issued by the Office of the Master of the Household in 1987, states that the side door of the equerries corridor shall remain locked at all times outside of formal access by the equerry-in-waiting or his designated officer. The second, issued by the Lord Chamberlain's office in 1991, states that the side door of the equerries corridor shall remain accessible during working hours to household staff, requiring passage between the south wing and the inner court. Both orders are in force. Both orders have been in force for longer than I have been alive. Neither order has ever been rescinded. Neither order has ever been reconciled. The door is locked and locked again, by different people throughout the day, each of them following one of the two orders, each of them entirely correct. I used to find it strange. I don't anymore. I tell you about it now because it is the small thing through which I came to understand the large thing. And because the week I'm about to describe is the week someone tried to fix it. His name was Marcus Pemberton, and on that Monday morning as I stood my post and watched the door do what the door does, he was somewhere in a glass building in the city, putting on a soft grey suit and packing a tablet into a leather case. He was, by every account I have been able to gather since, a decent man. He was clever. He was 38 years old. He had spent 6 years restructuring the back offices of a merchant bank, and 4 years before that doing something similar for a hospital trust in Manchester. He believed with the clean conviction of a man who has only ever worked in places that were designed, that systems should be coherent. He was wrong, but he was not stupid, and that is what made the week so dangerous. I did not know any of this on Monday morning. I knew only that the door was locked, and then unlocked, and then locked, and that somewhere above my pay grade a meeting had been arranged for Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Captain Holloway had told me on Friday in passing that I might be asked to attend in an observational capacity. He had said observational with the particular flatness officers use when they want you to understand that something is happening and they are not yet certain what. I stood my post until 0900. The door was locked twice more and unlocked once. A porter I did not recognize came through carrying a stack of folded linens. A young woman from the master's office came through carrying nothing at all. Both of them used keys. Neither of them looked at me. That is how it should be. At 0902, I was relieved by Corporal Davies, who is 23 and still surprised by things. He asked me if anything had happened. I told him no. I told him to mind the door. Pemberton arrived on Tuesday at 9:45. I saw him cross the color court from the ambassador's entrance, escorted by a woman from the private secretary's office whose name I have forgotten. He was carrying his leather case and a small paper cup of coffee, which he had clearly bought outside and brought in with him, which is the sort of thing that tells you a man does not yet understand where he is. The briefing was held in the small paneled room on the first floor of the Lord Chamberlain's wing. There were 7 of us in the room. Pemberton, the woman from the private secretary's office, Lady Annalise Marchwood, deputy to the Lord Chamberlain, 61 years old, in a grey wool dress, sitting very still, Sergeant Major Crane, in uniform, standing by the window, Captain Holloway, Mr. Aldridge from the Master of the Household's office, and me in the corner, observational. Pemberton began well. He thanked us for our time. He acknowledged the long history of the institution. He said he was not here to disrupt, but to clarify. He used the word clarify 4 times in the first 3 minutes. Then he opened his tablet and showed us his findings. 47 contradictions. He had identified 47 instances across the standing orders of the household in which one order directly conflicted with another. He had them organized by department, cross-referenced by date of issue, and color-coded by what he called severity. The side door of the equerries corridor was item 19. He read it out. He looked up mildly and said that he was sure we would all agree. This was the sort of thing that ought to be resolved. Nobody spoke. I want you to understand what kind of silence that was. It was not hostile. It was not surprised. It was the silence of 5 people, each of whom had been in the building long enough to know exactly what they were being asked, none of whom wished to be the first to explain it. Lady Marchwood looked at her hands. Crane looked out the window. Mr. Aldridge looked at Pemberton with the expression of a man watching someone reach into a wasp's nest in the belief that it is a hat. Captain Holloway eventually cleared his throat and said that the findings were very thorough. He said it would be useful to understand the proposed methodology. He said methodology in the way you say sir to a man you do not respect. Pemberton, who did not hear it, smiled and said he intended to resolve the contradictions one by one, beginning with the most operationally simple, and that he expected to complete the process within a fortnight. Lady Marchwood said very quietly that she looked forward to seeing his progress. She did not look up when she said it. The meeting ended at 10:37. Pemberton shook everyone's hand. He shook mine last. His hand was dry and his grip was firm, and he looked me in the eye and thanked me for my service, which is something civilians sometimes do when they don't know what else to say to a man in uniform. I thanked him back. He left with the woman from the private secretary's office. The rest of us stood in the room for another moment, not looking at each other, and then Crane said to nobody in particular, "Well," and walked out. In the corridor, Holloway stopped me. He asked if I had understood what I had just seen. I said I thought I had. He said good. He said to keep my eyes open this week. He did not say what for. I went back to my post. The door was locked. By the time I came off shift at 1600, it had been locked and unlocked 11 times. Pemberton, I would later learn, spent that afternoon in the records office with a junior archivist, beginning at item 1 and working downward. Item 1 was a contradiction between 2 orders concerning the routing of internal mail. He resolved it before tea. It was a small thing. It was the first one. By Wednesday afternoon, he had cleared 6. By Thursday morning, 11. I want to tell you about Thursday, because Thursday was the day I started keeping the list. It began with a delivery van. A wine merchant from Mayfair, the same firm that has supplied the household for 60 years, arrived at the West Gate at 11 o'clock with a consignment for the staterooms. The gate officer turned him away. The driver, who had been coming to that gate twice a month for 9 years, asked why. The officer said his name was not on the list. The driver said his name had never been on the list, that the standing arrangement was for the merchant's vehicles to be admitted on sight of livery. The officer said that arrangement had been rationalized on Tuesday and replaced with a unified access list, and the driver's name was not on it, and he was sorry, but he could not admit him. The driver went away. The wine did not arrive. The staterooms went without their delivery for 2 days, which is not a crisis, but is the sort of thing that in a building like this is noticed. That was at 11 o'clock. At 12:15, a footman named Reginald Pierce was locked out of the south wing pantry for the first time in 21 years. His key, which had always worked, no longer worked. He stood at the door for a full minute, tried the key twice, and then went to find a locksmith from the works department. The locksmith told him the lock had been changed on Tuesday evening as part of a security harmonization. Pierce asked why he had not been informed. The locksmith said he didn't know. At 2 o'clock, the flowers did not arrive in the yellow drawing room. This one I had directly from Mrs. Whitcomb, who I should now introduce to you properly, because she becomes important. Doreen Whitcomb was 63 years old and had been in service at St. James's for 41 of them. She had started as a housemaid in 1983 and had risen, by a route nobody could quite trace, to the position of senior housekeeping supervisor for the household wing. She was a small woman, soft-spoken, with very tidy grey hair, and she missed nothing. She and I had a standing arrangement which had no official sanction at all, in which she would, twice a week, bring me a cup of tea at the changing of the guard, and we would not discuss anything in particular, and I would, in exchange, hold a door for her when she needed it held. We had been doing this for 9 years. On Thursday afternoon, she brought me my tea and stood beside me for a moment longer than usual. She said in her quiet way that the flowers had not come to the yellow drawing room. I said, "Oh?" She said the standing order for the yellow drawing room had been, since 1994, that fresh flowers were to be delivered each morning by the household florist on the instruction of the master of the household, and that a second standing order from the Lord Chamberlain's office required that fresh flowers also be present in any room in which a member of the royal family might be received that day, on the instruction of the Lord Chamberlain's office, and that these two orders had, for 30 years, resulted in flowers always being in the yellow drawing room, sometimes from one source, sometimes from another, sometimes from both. She said the contradiction had been rationalized on Tuesday morning into a single order from the master of the household, and that the master's order had been correctly followed, and that the florist had been instructed not to deliver to rooms not on the day's schedule, and that the yellow drawing room had not been on the day's schedule, because the schedule had been drawn up under the assumption that the Lord Chamberlain's secondary order would catch any rooms the master's order missed, she said. All of this in about 20 seconds, in a voice no louder than the rustle of her apron. Then she sipped her tea and said, "Strange week, Edmund," and went on her way. I started the list that night. I wrote it on the back of a duty roster, in pencil, in my own kitchen. By Thursday at midnight, I had 19 items on it. Small things. A locked pantry, a turned-away van, a missing flower delivery, a footman without access, a porter who had been told to use a different staircase, a radio frequency reassigned. A duty roster reformatted in a way that had caused 2 officers to arrive for the same shift. None of them were catastrophes. All of them were the same shape. The door of the equerries' corridor, I should tell you, had been locked since Wednesday morning, permanently. Pemberton had resolved item 19. The 2 contradictory orders had been replaced by a single order from the master of the household requiring the door to remain locked at all times, with access by key only to designated personnel. It was on paper a tidier arrangement. On Thursday at 3 o'clock, I watched Mrs. Wickham try the door. She tried it twice. Then she stood for a moment with her hand on the handle, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and neither of us said anything. She walked away down the long way round, which added 4 minutes to her route. I made a small mark in pencil on the back of the duty roster. Friday was the state dinner. You should understand that a state dinner at this level is not a meal. It is a piece of choreography that has been refined over 300 years and is held together by approximately 400 small protocols, of which perhaps 60 are written down, and the rest are carried in the heads of about a dozen people who have been doing this for a very long time. The master of the household runs the room. The Lord Chamberlain's office runs the precedence. The private secretary's office runs the political weight. Each of them has standing orders. Several of those orders contradict each other. Until that Friday, nobody had ever needed to think about why. The guest of honor was a foreign ambassador. I will not name his country. It is enough to say that his government took precedence with great seriousness, and that his seating at the table was a matter on which his foreign ministry had, in the past, been known to take an interest. The seating plan had been drawn up on Wednesday by the master of the household's office, in accordance with the newly rationalized precedence protocol, which Pemberton had resolved on Tuesday afternoon as item 9 on his list. The previous arrangement had involved 2 parallel precedence lists, one maintained by the master of the household and one maintained by the Lord Chamberlain, which in practice were cross-checked by a clerk in the private secretary's office on the morning of any state occasion, and any discrepancy was resolved by a phone call. Pemberton had judged this He had merged the 2 lists into a single canonical list, maintained by the master of the household, with the Lord Chamberlain's list formally retired. The ambassador was seated 2 places below where his government expected him to be seated. The discovery was made at 7:49 in the evening, 11 minutes before service, by Captain James Holloway, who had wandered through the dining room on his way to a guard post and had stopped the way you stop when something is wrong, but you don't yet know what, and had looked at the place cards. I had this from Holloway himself, 2 days later, over a drink. He said he had stood at the head of the table for perhaps 15 seconds, looking at the cards before he understood what he was seeing. He said he had then walked, not run, to the master of the household's office and asked a question. The duty officer had checked the list. The list was correct according to the new protocol. Holloway had then walked, still not running, to the Lord Chamberlain's wing and asked Lady Marchwood the same question. Lady Marchwood had not checked anything. She had said the name of the ambassador and the name of his country and a number, which was the position he should have been in. The number did not match the place card. There were now 9 minutes before service. What happened in those 9 minutes I do not know in full. I know that 3 cards were moved, that 2 guests were repositioned without their knowledge, that a footman was sent to the kitchen to adjust the order of a course, and that none of it was visible from the room. I know that the ambassador was seated in the position his government expected him to be seated, and that he never knew it had been otherwise, and that his foreign ministry never knew, and that the dinner proceeded without incident, and that the next morning's press described it as a warm and successful occasion. I was on post at the entrance to the state apartments throughout the evening. I saw none of this. What I saw was Holloway pass me twice at a pace that was not quite a walk and not quite a run, his face doing a thing I had seen it do only once before in Afghanistan in 2011. I saw Lady Marchwood go into the master of the household's office and come out 2 minutes later. I saw Mrs. Whitcomb, who was not on duty that evening, but who was there anyway in a dark coat, standing very still in a doorway watching. The dinner ended at 2300. The guests left. The household settled. I came off post at midnight and walked home through St. James's Park, which was empty and cold, and I sat down at my kitchen table at 12:40, and I began to write. I wrote until 2:17 in the morning, 1 page, single-spaced, no accusations, no politics, just an explanation in the plainest language I could find of why each of the 47 contradictions existed, and what each of them was actually doing, and what would happen if they continued to be removed. I did not name Pemberton. I did not need to. I put it in an envelope. I did not address it. I went to bed. I want to tell you what happened to that envelope, because it is the part of the story I'm proudest of, and I did almost none of it. On Saturday morning at 6:50, I arrived at the staff entrance at the rear of the household wing. Mrs. Whitcomb was in the staff kitchen, as she always was on a Saturday morning, making the first pot of tea of the day. I gave her the envelope. I did not explain what was in it. I said only that I thought she would know what to do with it. She took it without looking at it, put it in the pocket of her apron, and asked me if I wanted a biscuit. I said yes. We did not speak about the envelope again. At 9:15, Mrs. Whitcomb took a cup of tea to Lady Marchwood in her office on the first floor. This was not unusual. They had been taking tea together on Saturday mornings for, I believe, 11 years. The envelope went with the tea. What was said in that office, I do not know. I have never asked. Lady Marchwood is not the sort of woman one asks. I know only that Mrs. Whitcomb came back down to the staff kitchen at 20 to 10 without the envelope, and that at 10:45 Lady Marchwood placed a telephone call from her office, and that at 11:30 a second telephone call was placed from an office I cannot name to an office I will not name, and that at 1400 on Saturday afternoon, Marcus Pemberton was contacted by the woman from the private secretary's office and asked if he would be available for a meeting on Monday morning. The meeting on Monday morning was brief and by all accounts cordial. Pemberton was thanked sincerely for his work. He was told that his findings had been valuable and that the household would be considering them carefully over the coming months. He was told that, in light of the breadth of his expertise, a different project had been identified for which his skills would be better suited, a review of procurement processes at a different institution, which I will not name, and which was, I understand, a genuine project, and which he accepted. He left the building at 11 o'clock on Monday morning carrying his leather case. He shook hands with the woman from the private secretary's office at the ambassador's entrance. He has not, to my knowledge, returned. Over the following fortnight, the 47 contradictions were quietly restored. Not all at once and not by any single instruction. The wine merchant's name went back on the gate list on Tuesday. The lock on the south wing pantry was changed back on Wednesday. The yellow drawing room's flowers reappeared on Thursday. The 2 precedence lists were reinstated by the end of the following week, with the Saturday morning cross-check restored by an unsigned memo from the private secretary's office that nobody questioned. By the end of the month, every contradiction Pemberton had resolved was back in place, and nobody anywhere in the building said a word about it. The side door of the equerries corridor was the last to be restored. The order from the master of the household requiring it to be permanently locked was not formally rescinded. It is, to my knowledge, still on the books. But on the Wednesday of the second week, the second standing order, the one from the Lord Chamberlain's office of 1991 requiring household access during working hours, was quietly reissued with a new date by the Deputy Lord Chamberlain, on the authority of Lady Marchwood. Both orders are now in force again. Both orders contradict each other. The door is locked and unlocked and locked by different people throughout the day, each of them following one of the 2 orders, each of them entirely correct. I never spoke to Lady Marchwood about the envelope. She has never spoken to me. Once, in the corridor outside the Lord Chamberlain's office, perhaps 3 weeks after the dinner, she passed me, and she nodded the way she nods to all of us, and she walked on. That was all. Mrs. Whitcomb retired the following spring. There was a small gathering in the staff hall, and Lady Marchwood attended, which she does not always do, and she gave a short speech in which she said that Mrs. Whitcomb had been the heart of the household for 42 years, and that the building would be poorer for her absence. Mrs. Whitcomb cried very briefly and then served tea. She lives now in a small house in Sussex with a garden. I sent her a card at Christmas. She sends me one back, in a hand that has not changed in any of the years I have known her. It is a Monday morning again. I am back on the colour court, 14 years and 7 months into my service now, and the sky over St. James's is the colour of weak tea, and the side door of the equerries corridor is locked. At 0641 it is unlocked. I see this time who unlocks it. He is a young footman I do not recognize, perhaps 22, new to the household, in a uniform that does not yet fit him properly across the shoulders. He unlocks the door with a key he has been issued, and he holds it open for a porter carrying a stack of folded linens, and then he closes it and locks it again, and he walks on. He does not look at me. That is how it should be. I think sometimes about Marcus Pemberton. I do not know where he is now. I imagine him in another glass building, in another grey suit, looking at another tablet, finding another set of contradictions, resolving them efficiently, and well, I imagine he is good at his work. I imagine the institutions he resolves are stronger for his attention, because most institutions are designed, and most contradictions in designed institutions are mistakes, and most mistakes should be fixed. I bear him no ill will. He was not wrong about what he saw. He was wrong about what it was for. I think about Mrs. Whitcomb in Sussex, in her garden. I think about Lady Marchwood, who is still in her office on the first floor of the Lord Chamberlain's wing, and who will, I expect, still be in it long after I am gone. I think about Sergeant Major Crane, who said well in the briefing room and walked out, and who knew in that moment exactly what was about to happen, and exactly how it would end. I think about Captain Holloway, who saw the place cards and did not run, and who saved a dinner that no one knew needed saving. I think about the door. I have come to believe in the years since that week that the things which last are not the things which are coherent. Coherent things are designed, and designed things have a single point of failure, and a single point of failure in a building like this one would have brought it down centuries ago. The things which last are the things which have grown 2 heads and 3 loyalties, and 4 standing orders that do not agree, and which have been pulled this way and that for so long that they have learned to stand up by leaning on themselves. You cannot draw them on a chart. You cannot rationalize them on a tablet. You can only stand near them for a long time and watch them work and mind the door. A clock somewhere in the building strikes the half hour. The young footman comes back the other way, unlocks the door, holds it for nobody, locks it again, walks on. He is following one order. Somewhere in the building, someone else is following the other. Both of them are right. Neither of them knows the other exists. The door is locked and unlocked and locked, and the palace for another morning holds together. I stand my post. I mind the door. That is the work.